Regular meeting of the Fargo Board of Education. Please, if you're able, stand and join us in saying the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, next we will move on to the recognition of the audience. At this time, the board will hear comments from the public. We ask that
Do we have
each...
to approve the agenda?
Thank you. We do. It's been 3 weeks since we've had a meeting, so I'm a little rusty. All right, I'd look for a motion to approve our agenda.
I move approval of the agenda. Sorry. Oh, that wasn't called on.
Yeah, okay, yes, Mr.
I
Holden.
move approval of the agenda along with the human capital addendum that's at our workstation.
Thank you.
Second.
All right, moved by Mr. Holden and seconded by Dr. Newman. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed?
Yes.
Thank you. Any opposed, same sign? All right, now moving on to our recognition of the audience. At this time, the board will hear comments from the public. We ask that each speaker who has signed up to address the board state their name and their home school district for the record. Speakers must refrain from using this forum to criticize or complain about a specific employee or student by name. Vulgar or profane language will not be tolerated. The board is interested in your comments and will listen carefully, but is not obligated to respond to or debate issues in this forum. This evening, 2 speakers have signed up to address the board. Each speaker will be allotted a maximum of 3 minutes. Upon conclusion of the allotted time, a chime will sound and the speaker is asked to conclude. If necessary, a final chime will sound 15 seconds later, signifying the end of the speaker's time at the podium. I will now call our first speaker to the podium, who is Devin Stachinsky.
Devin Stachinsky, HMR. In case you were curious who I'm going to vote for. Tonight seems to be mostly about the superintendent. So let's get started with some of the past several meetings. And you want to start the timer so I don't go over my 3 minutes? The comments made, the near tearful bloviations, I would call them, over the last several meetings, don't really align with the teachers' surveys. 2/3 of the teachers are not happy with administration's approach. And not once in the hour and a half of talking over the last 2 meetings was it ever a consideration that perhaps the approach from the administration is incorrect and not the teachers, considering that 2/3 of them are unhappy. But let's move on to Memo 120, the continuous improvements and accountabilities. On page 2, it says that evidence for reasonable progress under the second bullet point is, during this school year, FPS recognized several data discrepancies and misinterpretations that were being previously used to determine disparate or negative outcomes. The district has begun the process of correcting these data points when possible or pivoting to more accurate data that will be used to identify inequitable outcomes. Now, to me, that says what happened with the last 8 years of data. Like, it's been a downward trend. Are we saying that all 8 years of data is bad and we need to correct? That's something that probably should be looked into. Onto the contract, quick. I have several questions about this. First, bullet point 7, that the superintendent agrees to abide by administer district policies that don't conflict with state or federal law. However, he's stated as such that he will violate state law. This was back in July last year. Bullet point 14, automatic extensions of the contract. I don't know any business that automatically extends a contract such as this. It's very strange to me. And bullet point 8, that the district that operate under a governance policy with governance process, BSR and EL policies to do board work and collaborate with administration. Now, if you want to modify any of those, that's going to end up going against the contract. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Miss Victoria.
Madam President, member of the board, my name is Victoria. I don't have anything fun for you today, but first I want to say thank you to Jim Johnson. I know he's not here, and Dr. Newman for your time you serve, and thank you for your service on our board. So I just want to say that. Today I just want to share with you, we are going to held our Back to School Connect 2.0 this year again. We did it last year. We had a lot of fun. We did a collaboration with Jefferson Elementary, and hope this year we will do it with them again, and really try to reach our kids. We ran into some things last year. The weather was really hot. We realized you can't cut hair in a hot sun. So we're going to be a little bit more smarter this year and making sure that the kids that are coming in getting a free haircuts, that we'll make sure that we have a cooler spot for them. So we're really looking forward to not only collaborate with our partners from last year, but we're also looking at expanding and bringing in more collaborative partners and really resources, because when we call it Back to School Connect, the whole point of it, it's actually to connect family with resources at the event. We just didn't want to put in an event as a back to school. We really wanted to connect with families and build that relationship and the partnership between our students, the teachers, the community. And so we look forward to do that again this year. We really want to reach out to our Native American population this year. Based on our data and our numbers, we noticed that we didn't have a lot of them show up. A lot of them that showed up was basically our clients that we provide service to. We really want to be able to reach out to that, and hopefully I can work with, the schools, try to see how we can reach out to the families, the Native American families in the community. But we're going to be providing the same services and probably expand it. So we're looking forward to that. So I hope you guys will be there and come meet some of the people in your community. I mean, they're the one who vote you to put you up here, and we're holding in a day that you can have no excuse. Because last year you have an excuse. You had a school board meeting. This year you will not have an excuse. So thank you, and you guys have a good night.
Thank you very much. Moving on to our report section, we will begin with our FEA report from President Kraft.
Thank you, President Birkeland and members of the board. This is a busy season for educators. It's like the time right before a holiday that you start kind of winding up for that holiday. And somehow it's simultaneously the time after the holiday when you start winding down and taking down the decorations and those sorts of things. So that's where educators are living right now as we get towards the end of May. Last week, we celebrated Educator Appreciation Week. We were able to provide FEA members a coupon for a free donut, and they had the opportunity all week to take that coupon down and grab a donut on our behalf. So we just wanted to have a tangible way of showing our appreciation to the members of the association. We also hosted a social event on Friday in collaboration with West Fargo Education Association, and members came together for food and door prizes and a bowling tournament. And the Fargo Education Association is the reigning champion of the bowling tournament between West Fargo and Fargo. So we have some new hardware that we get to hold on to at least for a year until it goes up on the line again. And just last night, we held a retirement social to celebrate the FEA members who are retiring from the district. And I was really humbled by their breadth of knowledge, their experience, their grace, and their wisdom. As is true with every retirement, every year that we come and look at the list of retirees, I can say without doubt that there are many good people moving on from the district this year. These are some of our most experienced colleagues, and we're grateful for the time that we've been able to spend with each of them, for the lessons that we've learned from them, and for their contributions to the district and the association. I reminisced with one of the retirees who used to come into my elementary classes when I was a student in this district, and she would lead the classes through a special craft project. And as I've become more knowledgeable about the practices of the district, I've often wondered about the mechanics behind the scenes of those craft projects. How did a teacher manage to be present for her child's classes and volunteer her time in the classroom while also managing to be employed by the district? And so I was given one last opportunity to engage with this teacher, and I asked that very question and learned that she was using her personal time to donate back to the students to be able to spend time in her own child's classroom. This time of year, I think that's the reality for a lot of teachers, for a lot of educators who are balancing their own need to be a good parent, their own desire to be there for their children, and at the same time, the responsibilities of also leading their students. Whether attending their students' track meet or the end of the year celebrations or a play or some kind of musical performance that might take place during the student day, there are many activities that take place, and I repeatedly hear teachers talking about using their district's personal time to pour into the lives of their own children. Tonight on the business agenda, memo number 121 issues a proposal to update the superintendent contract. There are several considerations that the board should contemplate as you prepare to vote on this matter. Firstly, the memo highlights that the superintendent would see a 2% increase in salary each year under the proposed contract. It also notes that there are proposed additions or increases to compensation in a number of other areas. I'd like to highlight exactly what is being proposed and ask the board to contemplate several questions while preparing to vote. One of the sections in the superintendent's contract is titled Expense Reimbursement. In essence, the superintendent receives an annual allowance, for lack of a better word, for in-district travel and meals. That's regardless of actual expenses. This proposal increases that line item by $2,500 for a total of $7,500 per year, or $28 per day of the superintendent's contract. Additionally, the superintendent is set to increase expenses by an additional $1,200 annually for cell phone coverage, and the proposal adds $2,000 in what it calls additional salary through a 403B retirement plan, with the option to receive this as cash instead. This contribution is also reported as compensation for the purpose of determining the superintendent's TFFR, or primary retirement contributions. So if you're keeping score, there's a 2% increase on salary, but also other increases that total $10,237 in the first year. That represents 4.4% increase when compared to the sum of the same salary items the previous year. In the second year of the proposal, the additional salary through the 403B retirement plan is set to have an additional $2,000 increase, along with an additional $4,630 increase to the base salary, for a total of 2.74% increase compared to the first year of the proposal. Said another way and put maybe much more clearly, if approved as presented, the superintendent will earn $23,497 more over the next 2 years. During this year's negotiations with teachers, a point of discussion became the multipliers contained within the teacher matrix. If you're not familiar with the multiplier structure, the base salary of a starting teacher who has no additional experience or education gets multiplied to increase compensation as experience or education are gained. It was the board's perspective that a veteran teacher may not be worth double a starting teacher, and the resulting contract reflected this priority. The multiplier for the most experienced teacher in the district, those with a master's degree plus 45 additional credits and at least 20 years of experience, decreased this year. Their multiplier decreased down from 1.99 in the previous agreement to 1.93 in the current agreement. In the current school year, this school year, the superintendent's multiplier, if we were to consider it that way, compared to a new teacher is 4.89. That is to say the superintendent's current compensation is 4.89 times that of a starting teacher. Under the proposal, next year the superintendent multiplier would increase to 5.11. So while the net value of a veteran teacher saw decreases this year, the multiplier decreased for the most experienced teacher, the comparative net value of the superintendent is set to increase. His multiplier is increasing. The questions to consider: is the board applying consistent philosophy across negotiations with teachers and the superintendent? Why is the superintendent worthy of a multiplier increase that would increase the disparity between a new teacher and himself when the most experienced and veteran staff were not given that same increase? Is the superintendent's job worth 5 times a starting teacher? This was a question that was asked about veteran teachers. Are they worth double a starting teacher? Should the superintendent multiplier grow while the teacher multiplier decreases? Board members need to contemplate these things before voting on this matter tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to the administration report. Dr. Gandhi?
Thank you. There is no administration report for tonight.
Thanks. All right, moving on to our consent agenda. I would look for a motion to approve it. Mr. Clark?
So moved.
Too late, Jim. I move adoption of the, approval of the consent agenda as printed at our workstations along with the human capital addendum.
Thank you. Moved by Mr. Clark and seconded by Ms. Day. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor, please say yes.
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 Any opposed, same sign. All right, thank you. Motion carries. Moving on to our business section, beginning with business item 7A, which comes to us through memo number 120. Dr. Gandhi, I would look to you to introduce this for us, please.
Thank you. So this is our time to provide our continuous improvement and accountability monitoring for Strategic Initiative 6. So provided with you in your board packet is our result monitoring report for this school year. This is going to be, this has been one result monitoring that has kind of shifted a little bit year after year and will continue to shift as we move forward next year to our strategic operational plan as well. Part of that reason has just been our transition and our shift as a district in recognizing how we use the term continuous improvement and accountability. So there are two real schools of thought regarding what that means and how that should be reported to the district. What we have provided to you today is more of the continuous improvement feedback cycle that we want to be able to use to be a learning organization as we move forward, and how we're using that piece for monitoring this report. In previous years, what we have provided to you is a snapshot of us doing our accreditation visit through Cognia, because they have also used the term continuous improvement and accountability for their accreditation piece. One of the things that we recognize is that reflecting on our preparation for our accreditation visits and meeting those standards are one piece, but that's not necessarily comprehensively looking at what we are doing as an organization to continuously improve around a variety of data points. We do recognize that our system is a system that needs to continue to grow and get better every single day, and there are many students for whom we are successful, but then there's also students for whom we have to try to find other opportunities so we can. So part of this accountability piece is taking a look at what are things that we can do differently, or what are some shifts that we're making as a system to be able to do that. I think that when we look at our data, some of this has been kind of highlighted in your report. As we've started getting more to a granular level, one of the things that we really recognized is that there were two major shifts for us as an organization. One is the fact that for several years, and I can't tell you how far back this goes, our graduation rate, specifically for our Native American subpopulation of students, has been underreported through the state reporting system. And we've been working with the state. While we don't have any resolution yet, the state is aware of the issue. But one of the things that we're looking to do and fix over time is start providing more local data and providing with the data that we have. Because what's happened is for any students that may qualify as multiracial but are Native American and something else, within our student information system, they're able to mark and code that. And what was happening for past several years is that when you report to the state's system, it, without anyone knowing until we were able to dive deeper into the data, was converting those students into a single race and pulling students out of that subpopulation. So when you look at that data into North Dakota Insights and other places, I think we've seen that be a big focus for us for the last couple of years because we've saw some disparate outcomes there and recognized that the outcomes weren't as disparate as we once thought. So, and we're talking almost about a 20 to 15%, depending on which campus you're looking at, graduation rate increase when we actually look at what our local data showed versus what has been reported in previous years. So that's one of the pieces that we are really looking at fixing as we move forward. There's been some other areas as well. Choice Ready. Choice Ready is an initiative that started with at our state level several years ago, and you'll see some significant jumps in our data. That's really reflective of two things. I think the first year, there was just some challenges specifically targeted at larger school systems, Class A schools, regarding the Choice Ready deadline and when state was collecting data. So a lot of our students weren't captured. That was a part of the reason, but the second reason is because it's been an incredible focus for us as a district, and we've been able to work with the state to improve our students are graduating Choice Ready tremendously. The work of Stephen Duro, Andy Dolan, and all of our staff, our teachers, and our secondary administrators around our district has shown some monumental growth. Even as when you look at not only our comprehensive buildings, but we're showing growth at Dakota High School. Our virtual academy has shown some significant growth in Choice Ready there as well. And some of that has been just more opportunities that we provided our students to graduate Choice Ready. Some of it has been recognizing different pieces. I know Dr. Gross and Andy advocated with the state for students that are in ROTC to be able to qualify for a military ready area too. So those are some of the really big highlights for us that we've been really proud of. You have a lot of different data points and different considerations in your board packet, so we don't have a presentation for you here today. We didn't want to regurgitate that information, but we do have Bob, Missy, Dr. Hansen is here from standards-based instruction, and Andy Dolan is here, as I heard, that talked about the Choice Ready data too. So if there's any specific questions that you have in the report, we are here and happy to answer them.
Thank you very much. To start our discussion, I would look for a motion. Mr. Holden?
I move that the board accept that reasonable progress has been made on RSI-6 for the 2023-2024 school year.
Second.
Thanks. Moved by Mr. Holden and seconded by Dr. Newman. Any discussion or questions for Dr. Gandhi or the guests he named?
I do.
Yes, Ms. Day.
Thank you, President Board. I have a quick questions on the data discrepancy or misrepresentation here. How many years is it since previous year? Did it when like since the school begins or is it 2 years ago or 3 years ago that you just aware of all of this that are happening?
It was through this year that we recognized some of those pieces. So I think we as a district have been trying to focus on our Native American graduation rate for a while. There was I think 2 years ago where Dr. Gross and I also actually sat down with our high school admin team and looked at the cohort of students to verify that whether there was a gap in 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade where students were falling behind, that would impact the graduation rate because we know that students to be on track to graduate at the high school level have to earn 6 credits a year. I think when we did that analysis and sat down with the high school admin teams, that was a couple years ago, it might have been right before COVID, if I'm not mistaken. We, at that point, had challenged our principals to track the 11th grade cohort so we can be ahead of it. And at that point in time, I still remember distinctly that all of our comprehensive high schools were above an 80% graduation rate. So we've been trying to rack our brains around why that translates to sometimes what's been reported as a 55 to 60% graduation rate the following year. What we did differently this year is Tristan Love, our Director of Educational Justice, recognized that why don't we go back and take a look at the students that were captured as non-graduates last year to see how many of them matriculated to uh, to our 5-year graduation rate, which is not something that it's data that we track, but it hasn't been data that we monitor or report out as frequently to see, and then the 6-year graduation rate as well. And when he did that, he actually went student by student with every one of our high school leadership teams and recognized that there was a gap, that some of the students that were reported as non-graduated, the schools actually had those students as graduated and fulfilling their piece. So that's what led us to go back to DPI, and DPI recognized that issue too. So it was brand new for everyone to be able to, because it really was a system piece. So DPI has been employing the system that collects student information, and no one knew until we were able to get more people involved and dive a little bit deeper that what was happening was the fact that the DPI system was taking any students that are multi-race and putting them into a single race. So maybe some of the students that we have considered as part of one graduation rate, they were going into other subpopulations.
Okay, thank you. So I see that, the Native Americans graduation rate, but I haven't seen other diverse students graduation rate because sometimes even when I go to the ND Insight and trying to see exactly what's going on in there, I can't really find the accurate information. Just as you mentioned, there is a discrepancy in the system that we have. Do you have any data regarding other students that are in our district that are from diverse communities? So we all can be aware, hey, this is what's going on with our student, with our other student. Here is the issues that they're facing within the communities. And then also to just wondering, how can we be able to help them too as well, just as Native American student?
Yeah, and what led us to kind of focus on the Native American subpopulation of students was because that was where we saw the biggest discrepancy or the biggest disparate outcomes for our students. But as you know, and as you've mentioned, ND Insights does track students by subpopulation, and that's what we are looking at as well. Going back to the methodology that helped us uncover this, we would have to go back to all of our school administrations, go back through the rosters of all of the students by each subpopulation and see which graduated. Again, I think the students that, I think there's been a couple of issues that we've discovered, but the main issue that we've discovered really has been students that whose either the students or the parents in our registration system have marked them for more than one race, and then it got, so that could have impacted the Black student population, the Hispanic student population, and so forth. But we would have to go back to each individual school of past graduates and then identify who were marked as multiracial in our system and then how they would have been converted into DPI. So I don't have that data for you right now, but that's how we would have to go back and get it.
Thank you.
Ms.
And I did
Eidsness, did you want to add something to
I
that?
did. So in the appendix, we also included some additional data. And so if you go down into the appendix of the document, we do have graduation. And for your graduation rate, we did say what were the 3 top student groups that perform for Fargo Public Schools. And then we also did what were our bottom 3 groups for graduation. And so that data is in the document. We definitely, the report, like you said, it gets almost cumbersome how they do it because they start overlapping, but you can check one at a time if you want to view all student subgroups. So for the district and for the state and any other school district to look at. So if you went back to last year's report, it would be the same data, it's done the same way, but you'd have it for last year too, the report 6. So we did keep that the same in both reports so that you could take a look at that. But I do think our strengths for graduation were former English language learners at 94, white at 87, Asian at 77. And that did kind of mirror the state, former English language learners at 90, white at 88, and Asian Americans at 81. For opportunity areas, Fargo Public Schools, our lowest graduation rates were students on IEPs with emotional disturbance at 29%, homeless students at 44, and students with IEP and disabilities at 51. Now, the state, they had the same groups that we compared to. For the state, it was at 42 for IEPs with emotional disturbance, 57 for homeless, and 64 for students with IEPs, with just disabilities in general. But I will tell you that all of the categories are there. They just didn't, any group I didn't read is in the middle, if that helps a little bit.
Yeah, well, thank you. I really
Yeah.
appreciate it. And I did see that there's no data available for Davies High School on Native American. Is there a reason why for that? It's NA in there.
I will go to Dr. Gross. I'm assuming it's going to be less than 20.
Less than 10. So when we share data, we make sure that anything that has a cell size less than 10, we do not share that data because students could be identified.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate, I don't mean to drill you guys on the questions, but I appreciate it. And I just think that, you know, our community do deserve, you know, might not be the right question the way that I should be asked, but I think that I do my best to make sure that they understand, you know, what we're doing here is, you know, is the fact that we all are here for our students and we need to ask the right question in order for them to understand what's going on because majority of them do not know. So, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Yes, Mr. Clark?
I appreciate them all asking the questions that she did. I had similar questions. And to kind of build off of them, I guess maybe first I'll acknowledge that I think this result policy is kind of as Dr. Gandhi alluded to before, it's kind of trying to do a lot of weird things at the same time. You know, like accreditation and like making sure we're improving, and then like hard veer over to like disparate student outcomes. And there's kind of the tentative tie between those two things to be like, well, okay, we've identified these disparate outcomes. Now how are we improving on there? So I'm acknowledging that, but at the same time, the policy that we're monitoring does ask for making those connections between what are those disparate outcomes and what are we doing to continuously improve upon them. And you know, in the section of the report, it's labeled page 5, but it's page 7 in the PDF. The policy indicator, you know, analysis of disparate negative student outcomes and plans for improvement. You know, I do appreciate a lot of the items that are mentioned. I have no doubt those are things that are worthwhile endeavors. I guess one of my bigger issues or questions is, you know, making the direct connection between, all right, here's an appendix worth of disparate outcomes that we've identified, and how do these things listed as key accomplishments directly tie to those disparate outcomes that we've identified. I'll pause there for a general response.
Great question. Same question that I think we've had and we've been asking too. So I think that the challenge for us and the reason why you have all of a variety of different data points in the appendices, and then we have key accomplishment challenges and next steps that may not be connected is because kind of our methodology to point doing these result monitoring reports to date has been like put all the data in the appendices and then highlight the different data points that you want that fall into those categories. So they may not be connected independently, but they might be across 5 different data points, whether it's math proficiency, graduation rate, choice ready, here's what we think are key accomplishments, here's where we're seeing opportunities. I think what you're looking for is what was this and what was the strategy that we did behind it to improve that. I don't think we designed this result report with that structure in mind. I'll just be honest with you because that wasn't, I think, the mind frame on how we used it. I know, Greg, you and I have had the same conversation too, which is, I think, a good conversation for governance. And I'll talk about one of the things that we're going to bring back is on the result policy when we talk about analysis of school district improvement plan and cycle and analysis of disparate negative student outcomes. At least to our strategic initiative teams and the leaders that are kind of owning some of this work, I never specified or I never interpreted that the board had to specify that both those bullet points had to be for each result. So we have just kind of left that as a gray area too in terms of make sure you're doing this to show your results and leave that autonomy to our department leaders, our cabinet members, everyone that's kind of contributing to this report because everyone owns a different piece. So that's the composition there. I don't think that right now, I mean, I'm sure Leanne, Andy, Bob and Missy can speak specifically to last year we noticed this is where we were in choice ready and here's the strategies we did. So I'm sure they can come up and talk about the specific things that they've done. When you see things that we put in key accomplishments like MTSS and some other pieces, that is supposed to be across multiple measures because MTSS is the framework that we're using to support our students that aren't showing proficiency at the first time instruction is delivered. So then what are we doing as a tier 2 intervention and as a tier 3 intervention? That strategy in itself and the structure we're putting around there could impact both local grades and state testing performance because we are constantly recycling what the instruction was and putting that piece. But that I can't sit here and say that strategy was specifically for 3rd grade reading because that's a tier 1 or tier 2 or tier 3 issue. But I think they'll be able to speak to that. As we go into our unified strategic and operational plan for next year, our goal is, because we kind of went through the same realization that what you just mentioned going through developing this report, is to propose some changes to the board and actually planning to bring that to the next governance meeting. One of which is, and Cabinet just talked about this earlier this week, defining a reasonable progress. And what does an analysis of or reasonable progress look like? Because if we have that information from the board on the front end, then we can specifically say, here's the measures that we're identifying, here's the strategies that we showed you, here's what worked and what didn't work. So that will be a structure that I think, depending on how governance and the board decides to move forward with our results policies that we can put in place for next year, it was in a structure on how this report was conducted.
Thank you for that. I think, yeah, so I fully acknowledge, that hopefully, right, everybody reading this report can kind of at least somewhat make the connection themselves between, hey, we're doing all these things because everything leads up to graduation, right? Like you can't just be like, oh, we're going to do MTSS and boom, like there's a connection between graduation. Some of these key accomplishments can certainly be more attributable to some of the disparate outcomes. I think maybe more clearer, I guess, question with an example that I had that might illuminate kind of where I'm getting at is regarding let's do we're still on the same page, page 5, 7 of the PDF. The sixth bullet point is about catalyst. It goes on to the next page, but it's mostly on that page. Mentioning that we have this new approach, this model, and hey, we certified a bunch of new people on this, and not necessarily trying to think of really specific outcomes, but more thoughts about the actual nature of the existence of disparate outcomes. One maybe good question to highlight this that I had was how has the expansion of the Catalyst certification been distributed throughout the districts? Are we seeing more, certification, more coaches at schools that we see having more disparate outcomes? Because we can talk about how this Catalyst approach is really great, but if all 80 new certifications came at Longfellow, that's not really going to serve the disparate outcomes really that's at the heart of this result policy. So, I guess bringing it back to a higher level, thinking about these, accomplishments or projects or whatever that we have going on, trying to maybe see more of the connection between how they're specifically serving those student groups, not necessarily the exact outcomes themselves.
So I guess maybe just to highlight a little bit of data. So back in August of 2021, the majority of the Catalyst coaching occurred at the elementary level, in specifically Kennedy, Lewis and Clark, Lincoln, and Washington. As we kind of fast forward now to May of 2024, every school building in the district receives coaching multiple times a school year. So it's in all of our buildings. Every school building in the district has at least one Catalyst internal coach because we want to make sure that all students have and all staff have the opportunity to this. And all school admins also are internal coaches. So we wanted to make sure that across our system, it's not just in one area, but we capitalized. Again, I think some of the biggest gains that we've seen, at least from my perspective, have been at the secondary buildings. And that has been through the conversations, through actually site visits, both in our own district, but also down to some of the schools in Minneapolis to see it in action. And I think as we continue to build our cadre of Catalyst individuals, we're seeing that approach, which is really designed for higher student efficacy, fewer dismissals from classrooms, and a more equitable learning environment. I see that really catching on, and more of our staff are looking towards that training.
Yes, Dr. Gandhi?
The information specific to the student outcomes, Greg, we don't have at this point in time, but we have already asked for it, and I can get that to the board. So a couple weeks ago, after we provided an update on the Catalyst implementation to our elementary and secondary principals, I shared that data with the board. That data was teacher feedback then and now, talking about the growth in implementation coaches and demonstration teachers that we had, and then also teacher survey feedback for how teachers are viewing their own implementation and even their own perceptions, both on themselves as a teacher with the implementation, with Catalyst being utilized, and then what they think of their students. What we didn't specifically have was a very direct student outcome that was a direct implementation of Catalyst. So our Catalyst coordinator for the district, Sydney, I did actually ask her the exact same question. For our campuses that have utilized it, and then across the system, are we able to pull, whether it's classroom management data or teacher referral data that says that Catalyst teachers have X, this has been the impact of that. She did share with me that she's working with Dell to be able to put that together. That was like last week or whenever I sent my weekly update. But that's exactly the same question that I had asked, and we just haven't got that yet.
Ms. Day?
Thank you. Mr. Clerk said it very well, but I want to reiterate that Catalyst Approach, I believe, is a very good program that we definitely should have at Fargo Public School because it has so many different background where teacher can really understand their students and strategy that they can put in place with them, especially with the student that have attitude or anything like that from their background and so forth. I have spoke to a couple of teacher about the Catalyst Approach and how impact it is in their classroom. Even when we went to Jefferson too, I believe that there was a training that we did over there, and we went to their classroom, and the teacher actually did demonstrate if there is no catalyst training, and then if there is none, you can tell the differences, and so forth, which I was really impressed of it. I just wish that, more teacher can really like support this kind of training toward them. So this way they can actually minimize the behavior within their classroom so they don't have to say, oh, I have a bad student in our classrooms and we need to get rid of them and so forth. And I think that is all about education. The more you educate the teacher about, it's not even educating them because that's the job that they love to do. They should find every resources that is available out there to be able to help them to navigate the behavior that they have in the system. So I'm just putting it out there. I think that this is great. And I just hope that, we can support all our teachers, our certified educators to increase this, to increase more teacher to really take this, so this way we can minimize the result that we are having within our school system and so forth. And I just thought this is great. So I just wanted to put in my input in there.
Yeah, Dr. Gandhi?
I think some of kind of, I don't want to call it the struggle, but the ambiguity in this conversation is why I'm more excited about the work that we're doing going into next year, where we do want to be more impact focused, because we have continued to look at Catalyst because we have the qualitative and anecdotal data on the classrooms that are calmer, the teachers that are feeling more supportive and that they're able to get to their lessons and do some of those pieces as well, the teacher satisfaction surveys from the implementation of Catalyst. But we never truly ever define on the front end what is that one specific outcome that we are looking for when we look at Catalyst as a strategy, right? So we are going, like I shared with you, I asked for that impact data referring to classroom management or classroom teacher referrals. But going into the school year, we never communicated that with our teachers too, that that's what Catalyst is going to be used for. As we look at next year, that is some of the pieces that we have tried to identify and put on the front end. So going into our plan for next year, and I'll say this now because I think this is going to be an important question when we're looking at the effectiveness of our strategy. So for our plan for next year, implementing and utilizing research-based environment supports for classroom management programs such as Catalyst is one of our standards, and then the very specific measures that we will communicate with teachers on the front end that we will then use to look at the effectiveness of that strategy are going to be focusing on, it's going to be 2 survey datas that says the elementary students who believe their learning is not affected by the behaviors of others in their classroom will increase compared to the previous year as measured on the climate and culture survey. And then the average score of secondary students who believe teachers changed their teaching to meet their learning needs will increase. And that's going to be the measures that we're using for programs such as the Catalyst implementation to look at their effectiveness. So we will have that direct strategy and impact and effectiveness thread for you next year. That doesn't mean that some of the other measures that we have around reducing student recidivism, reducing discipline issues, won't also be a subsidiary benefit of implementing the Catalyst district-wide, but that's going to be the very specific goals that we are looking to measure the effectiveness of that program. And hopefully, we can communicate that at the start of the school year with our staff. This is what we're tracking, this is why we're doing what we're doing, and then be able to report that back out to you going into this cycle or this.
Thank you. Other questions, comments?
Yeah, I think that actually kind of leads pretty well into one of the other questions I had, but maybe more broadly. Could you speak to, I guess, maybe some of the rationale or strategy behind clearly communicating what outcomes are being tracked? Not necessarily from like the perspective of, like their strategic plan where it's like, here's the outcomes we're going to meet, otherwise people are going to get fired, like not that kind of thing, but more from like from our teacher's perspective where it's like, with the strategic plan or different metrics, it's not like, well, district wide we didn't hit 80% proficiency, so everybody's fired. But there's still benefit, presumably, to clarifying what the expectations are. And I was wondering if maybe you could say more on that. And I guess one of the reasons I really want to know is there was an item in this report that I was really scratching my head about, and maybe more confused than anything. But I think it gets to the heart of this question or this topic. On page 4 of the report, it's page 6 in the PDF at the bottom. The example or the bullet point is shifting and alignment of student data. And I think this gets kind of to the heart of what you were just discussing about, hey, there's this professional development, but the paragraph more or less says, hey, we need to make sure we're connecting it to student outcomes or it's not going to be as effective. And I was a little confused because with this example, I mean, I'm trying to understand how there can be a disconnect between a professional development about reading and student outcomes. I mean, I don't know why it needs to be, clarified during training that, hey, we're trying to see better outcomes with student reading when we're talking about a day of professional development about the science of reading, but maybe this gets at kind of the heart of what I was talking about.
This, because I wrote that part, and I want to make sure I can address it and clean it up if needed, but the state required that year that we had to put in 30 hours of training on science of reading. The report to the state was, did each person complete it? It wasn't about students. Does that make sense? And so that we need to shift from that to say now, was there an impact on our student data because we did science of reading? Now, I will say, which I'm excited about, at January, we had every principal report data as a whole to each other around their data. And we are seeing some really nice growth in our primary grades, which doesn't show up in our NDSA assessments because it's 3rd, 4th, and 5th. So I just found that gave people a lot of energy because we're finally seeing some shifts in our student data around reading. And so then we probed more with questions around, do you think it's because we have common language? Do you think the order was right, with the PD? But we did not start science of reading. I mean, it was, yes, we'd mention it, but we didn't start with a goal. Do you know what I mean? Around student success. It was because the state said we had to do the training. Does that help, Greg? It wasn't connected to student. I mean, it was incidentally, but it wasn't where we set a goal around it.
Dr. Gandhi?
Yeah, and I also think that your question is great because the science of reading is the best example. I have a whole presentation on why I think the aligned goals will be better, but essentially why it's better is because it tells us exactly how we're tracking the goals. So the biggest shift in science of reading, so we as a district, we were the pioneers to kind of lead the state in that shift from one of our buildings, but we also have staff that have been using balanced literacy or an approach that science of reading wouldn't necessarily promote as a current practice. And the reason that's shifted is because across education in general, but even across reading instruction, there is a wide variety of different data points that we are assessing to assess student progress. So within reading, we look at reading fluency, we could look at reading comprehension, and then we can look at proficiency as it relates to state standards. And one of the pieces, the reason that science of reading, the movement came up, but why it has been, why there's podcasts about it and movies about it, is because in a way, it's not just advocating for this new approach to reading. It is saying that some of what traditionally balanced reading and some of the other programs have been using to even measure student comprehension of reading is not actually a measurement of reading, but we have staff that have been ingrained in that. So the reason that we need some of that clarity in terms of what is the exact outcome that we are trying to measure is because sometimes you can have two different individuals promoting, saying that this professional development is improving reading scores, but you're looking at two different data points. Specifically, what science of reading, which is based on neuroscience, will tell you is that 20% of students are going to become readers in themselves, right? And then there's two methodologies to how you could teach reading. One is teaching students to use the context around you to be able to comprehend and understand the meaning, and then one is through starting with, it's a braided approach, starting with your fluency and going accordingly. When the traditional approach prior to the movement to science of reading was utilized, I believe, and I don't want to say this incorrectly, but Missy can correct me, we were assessing comprehension and saying that students were proficient readers, but proficiency is actually not just being able to use context clues to comprehend something if you can't read and decode that word and understand what that grapheme means and go and understand that this word means this because of this letter word association, not because of, well, I'll just give you the best example. One of the strategies for elementary reading in the non-science of reading approach is called a 3Q approach. The 3Q approach teaches students that if you can't understand and read this word the first time around, you can't pronounce that, you can't comprehend, do that letter word association, you have three other cues that you could look at. It could be the images on the page, it could be the surrounding sentences, or something else. What science of reading will tell you is that if students create this dependency on being dependent on one of those cues, they've never truly learned that skill of reading, but they are being marked as proficient readers in how we assess that in that old role. But in reality, they're just associating using that context clues, even though they never learned that skill that they wanted to do. So that is why the clarity on how that student outcome works and how we're measuring that outcome is very important, because without being able to provide that to our staff, we will have people using different data points across our system to be able to show progress or whether something's working or not. And then it just becomes a competition of which approach does the district want to use versus what's actually most effective in being able to look at success for the students based on that one universal standard that we've identified.
Other questions? Yes, sure. Mr. Clark?
Real quick, for anyone who hasn't listened to the podcast series Sold a Story, I strongly recommend it. Anyway, the last thing I'll talk about is, it has a really long and kind of fancy name, the FPS Code of Character and Supports. In various places throughout this report, it said that this will improve transparency with parents, And it also says, this is a direct quote. I wouldn't make a claim so bold, but it says it will guarantee uniform and fair disciplinary practices across all schools. I'd like to learn more about this magical thing.
Our two associate superintendents have been working very hard this year with our Director of Educational Justice on the student code of conduct, and why. But I can give you one quick example of why I believe in those two statements. While I can't guarantee perfection, I do think it's going to help with transparency with parents and uniformity. The code of conduct, not only is it allowing us to identify consistent practices in response to certain student behaviors, but it is also going through this process that Bob Missy have been working on throughout the year of identifying what behaviors are going to be monitored, what they mean, and what that looks like if that behavior is submitted to an administrator or someone to address. When some of this conversation started, we had a large percentage. I remember looking at that pie where it was a very ambiguous term for one of the largest referrals that we had last year when we were looking at that data. I don't think it was off-task behavior. It was something that was very subjective. Even I couldn't identify what it would mean between any two teachers. And they might remember the exact term that it was.
Unruly.
Unruly behavior. Unruly could mean a variety of different things to different people. And that is why we are trying to get more granular and accurate. And that's why we think unruly behavior to a parent from a principal at one school could potentially mean something different to someone else, and therefore not be transparent, and also be addressed in different ways in different schools. And that's why we think that character code of conduct will help. Unruly, thank you.
Dr. Gross?
So as a committee has come together to really work on this, it's to look at defining a code of conduct for all members of the school, what it means for students, for parents, for staff, and administrators as well, and what that means across our system. Defining right now what the expectations there are for all those individuals, my rights and my responsibilities as a student, my rights and responsibility as a staff member and as an administrator. And then the part that I think will really help us is looking at those code of conducts and really saying, what are the different levels of behavior within our system, from a level 1 and 2, things that most likely would be handled from a classroom teacher's perspective, those level 3s that are the pieces that most likely your building administrator will deal with, and then those 4s and 5s that are things that could potentially, according to some of our other policies in the district around suspension, expulsion, potentially lead to those. But to clearly define what they are, clearly give definitions for everyone in our community. So from building to building, everyone is looking at them the exact same way. Everyone is looking at the same consequences that might come out of those. And then how can we systematize that as a system? I'm not saying that we're not doing that now, but this is putting it all in one place, being very transparent for our students, our staff, and our parents, so that all can have that information moving forward.
Dr. Gandhi?
And I just want to share, not just us as a school system, but I mean, this is going to be ongoing work for us. I've had this conversation with some members of our team, and I think even as a society, sometimes like we still are going to have some vague terms as it relates to behaviors that we are trying to identify down the road. Like I would love to be able to be in a system where we can, if we define behavior as something that can be taught and rectified, and a symptom as something that needs treatment to be rectified, I do think that especially when it comes to an act of aggression or violence, we don't have a way to delineate between what is a behavior and what is a product of a mental health system that needs treatment, right? Sometimes a particular act by an individual, adult or student, can be a symptom of a treatment need but we, even as society, don't know how to delineate between that and a behavior. So that's why we're trying to get more concrete, and like that would be my vision down the road, where we have the tools to be able to do that. But I think that's something that we're still struggling with, both at the adolescent and adult level as well. But that's why we're trying to do some of this work, because it is, what is something that can be taught to be rectified to reduce recidivism, and what is something that actually might have been a byproduct of a deeper treatment need that someone needs because they are in crisis or because of a mental health issue or what the case is. So those are some of the pieces that we're trying to figure out so we can give students what they need to be able to be supportive.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? You have one more? All right, Mr. Clark.
This will be short. We, pretty much all of my questions and comments have been on the part of the result policy regarding disparate outcomes. But I would like to highlight that I think the unified strategic plan is a very large and obvious sign that the first result in this policy is being achieved.
All right, if there aren't any other questions or comments, Ms. Campbell, could you please call the roll?
Yes. Christensen,
Yes.
Clark,
Yes.
Day,
Yes.
Holden,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Berkland.
Yes, motion carries. Moving on to our next order of business, 7B, which comes to us through memo number 121. Mr. Holden, since you were the chair of this ad hoc committee, would you like to introduce this for us?
Yes, I would. As the memo states, on the 26th, we were assigned the ad hoc duties for that committee, and we met on the 10th. As part of that committee, we analyzed other districts and contracts to make sure that we're comparable with with other districts. As the memo states, some of the changes that we made to the contract were an increase in the expense reimbursement, an added section for the annual contribution. I'll elaborate on that as I go through. An added section to include the already received cell phone reimbursement and the updated compensation. The numbers are there, the 2% increase per year. One of the things that we wanted to do was to be consistent with a 4% increase, given that was what we were working with when we were doing the teacher contract negotiations this year. However, in an effort to not have the superintendent's salary compound so drastically from year to year, that was the reason for splitting the 2%, the 4% increase into a 2% increase to the salary, and that 2% other increase went to the 403B. So now, as the second year comes along, we're putting 2% onto a 2% increase rather than 4% onto a 4% increase. They're making the superintendent's salary not compound so much, but the compensation is still there in a different form. I do want to point out some of the data that was shared during the FEA report. I want to make sure that we're comparing apples and apples and not apples and oranges. The multiplier that was shared with us takes into consideration the increase of the expense reimbursement, the cell phone reimbursement, and those other pieces of compensation, rather than just strictly looking at the 2% increase of the salary. We don't do that with our teacher salaries. We don't, if for example, if you're a course captain or a team leader, you get a extra piece of compensation for that. If you're getting that compensation, we don't add that to your salary and then figure out that you have a different multiplier Same would be if you're a special education teacher, your multiplier isn't different in the matrix because you get the extra $6,000. We're strictly talking about the percentage of the increase of the salary, not the total compensation. Um, and so I just want to make sure that we're comparing the correct numbers when in respect to the actual percentage of increase to the salary of both the teachers and for the superintendent as well. So with that memo explanation, a little bit of context there, I'll make a motion that the board that the 2024-26 contract with Dr. Rupak Gandhi be approved and signed accordingly by the president of the board and Dr. Gandhi.
Second.
Thank you. I heard a move by Mr. Holden and then seconded by Mr. Johnson.
Correct.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Yes,
Melissa?
yes, Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, I just got a couple of thoughts to share. First and foremost, well, at governance, I'll address what happened earlier today in the FEA report. I was the person that put that into the board agenda many years ago, and it clearly was abused tonight, which is a different matter. But one thing I think needs to be pretty clear, at least from my perspective as a board member, philosophically, we as a district should never want to have all of our employees get the exact same percentage raise. We need to get to a time and place where we can pay our most valuable employees for what they do. We recently did this with special ed, where we recognized they deserved additional compensation. So to say that our superintendent and a custodian should both have the same percentage raise each year is not the way to manage a public entity. We need to get the best people we can for each and every position and pay them appropriately. And I'm going to support what the committee came up with because we have the best superintendent in North Dakota and we need to keep him if we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Clark, did you have questions or comments?
Yeah, so I had questions about the section of the contract, item 3, expense reimbursement. And this is, I've read it a few times and I honestly don't know exactly how to interpret the contract language. Is the total reimbursement amount guaranteed regardless of whether there are expenses to be reimbursed? And it sounds like a crazy question, and I'll admit that, but it says that, in the amount of $7,500 per year payable in 12 equal monthly payments. I mean, does that mean well, I should divide that. 7,500 divided by 12. I mean, is that just like a guaranteed $625 a month, regardless of if there are expenses?
Melissa?
Yes, Mr.
I can answer this.
Okay.
This is not a new function per se in this contract. Obviously, the committee changed the number slightly, Greg. But yes, you are correct in looking at it from the perspective of a reimbursement. You would think it could alter, but that's not the case. It is an expense allowance, might be a better way to look at it. And yes, that amount of money, $7,500, is additional compensation that is going to go to the superintendent. But again, this has just been a function of the superintendent contract for quite some time, as opposed to, quite frankly, having them submit expense reports for incidental expenses that they incur. So, in answer to your question, yes, it is an absolute amount of money that will be paid to Dr. Gandhi should this contract be approved.
Dr. Gandhi, you have comments?
The only thing I'll share with why I think that's more common in superintendent contracts is that though the clause is called expense reimbursement, it actually has two functions: expense reimbursement and in-district travel. So there's two ways that it could happen. It's tracking your mileage for in-district travel, and then doing the federal rate for mileage or whatever, and the expense reimbursement. So that's normally that clause that covers both of those, to avoid the in-district miles, which could potentially, year after year, I don't track my miles because I haven't had to, but I don't know what that would come out to as well, but it covers that function as well.
Other questions?
I guess I'm trying to maybe distinguish between it increase to, and I appreciate Jim rephrasing it to a reimbursement allowance because I think that helped me wrap my head around it. But I guess I am kind of trying to distinguish the difference between, you know, an increase to an allowance and an increase to a salary. You know, and I wasn't part of the, what do you guys call yourself, a commission or a committee, ad hoc committee?
I was kind of hoping Tara would be here to answer any contract questions, but that expense reimbursement isn't going to go. If I'm wrong, correct me here. But and Jim, you might have more context on this too. But that $7,500 reimbursement is not going to be counted towards his retirement TFFR, where a part of this, or if it was actually part of his salary, it would be. Am I right on that, Jim?
Yes, I believe you are
Okay.
right. There's another part to this too. To the extent that RUPOC would want to document and turn everything in, he could end up having to pay taxes on some of this money based upon the fact that whether he had the actual receipt turned in or not, that's up to him to now do the tax accounting work on. So, but you are correct, Seth.
Ms. State, do you have a question?
I do, and I think that I kind of talked to you about this earlier too as well. I know that Seth mentioned about the contracts has been compared to other districts. I mean, to other statewide and so forth. How many districts in North Dakota have you guys compared this contract to?
Yeah, I think Bismarck, West Fargo, Grand Forks.
So what-
Some of the larger districts in the state.
Okay, so what did you guys find in that? Is there any like overview that we can look into, or just out of your, just what you read?
I don't think that we're much more different, plus or minus, from several districts within single digits percentage wise. I think it was pretty close.
If I remember correctly, Dr. Gandhi was in the middle.
Yeah.
I mean, of the biggest districts. So it wasn't top, it wasn't lowest when he looked at like the 5 or 6 biggest districts in the state.
Okay.
Did the email with the PDF attachments of all the other districts go out to the whole board or just me and the committee?
Because I didn't see
I
it.
believe that data just came to us, but it is public information.
Yeah,
Happy to share that.
Okay. And then-
I got a spreadsheet with
okay.
it. It wasn't, it
Oh,
didn't,
yeah, no,
it
you
didn't,
were-
it didn't place it, this contract in that
No.
context, but it was historical.
Okay. Well, thank you for clarifying that. And then also, I did see that, doing this contract, it looked like there's automatic extensions. I know that you mentioned a little bit of it when I asked you a question before our meeting began. But after reading this, it's kind of a little bit, I'm trying to understand it, just like, Greg said, this language is a bit different because I am not a person who so good with numbers, but I just want to understand, why is it automatic extension?
So I can maybe ad lib lawyering a little bit. I do wish Tara was here too. The way I read the paragraph 14 automatic extension is that if the district exercises its right to notify by April 15th of 2026, there is no automatic extension. But I would love it if somebody else shared.
Melissa?
Yes, Mr. Johnson?
I'll just share one thought. If we could legally do a 10-year contract with RUPOC, I would have recommended we draft that. But it's not allowed by law. This is the best we can do in hopes of retaining them past the period of the contract itself. And of course, it's not binding on him, but it allows him to know if we intend to not renew him so he can explore the world as a free agent. Unfortunately, we cannot lock him into a longer contract than this period is. At least I believe that's still the case under state law.
Thank you, Jim, for saying that. I truly appreciate it. I think that we do have amazing superintendent in the whole North Dakota. I normally don't say it, but I'll say it. But as a board, we are subjected to ask question to make sure that we asking the right question to our board and to whoever can answer those questions to us, so that way we can vote accordingly. And for me, as I think that this is I want to see more about, like I said, I just have just, the language is, it's beautiful, I'll call it that way, but at the same time, I just wanted to make sure that I clarify everything before I voted, just as Jim said earlier, it's not every district or it's not every employee should have the same increase. It doesn't work that way. There are incredible individuals that we have in our districts, and we should definitely withhold those at a higher standard, so that way we can have the best educator too. In our districts, of course, because I always stand with teachers, because I believe that teachers should be paid more than anything in the world, because without teacher, we wouldn't have superintendent Dr. Gandhi here. We wouldn't have engineer, we wouldn't have anybody else in that would be in that position to teach. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say. I just want to say thank you and for answering those questions, Seth.
Thanks. Dr. Gandhi?
I just want to chime in and first say thank you. I do believe that our community, our staff, and everyone kind of is owed these questions and these conversations as well. So I'll just share a little bit of kind of my perspective going in, and I know I appreciate Jim's comments on salary as well. So I think that's up to the board, and I won't touch on that. One of the things that I did come in to the ad hoc committee meeting with kind of full transparency was I kind of told the board, based on like whatever your number is or what you're thinking, I proposed the distribution of where the equivalent of that number would go for a variety of reasons. One is because I don't think I should be, and nor do I want to be, looking at where my salary would rank compared to other superintendents in the state. So we're not the largest district, and there's other factors at play too. So I think this puts me at number 4 in the state, and that was one of the things that we wanted to look at. But one of the things that was important for me is we referenced not only the local contracts that Seth mentioned, but the National Superintendent Study put out by ASA, the National Superintendent Organization, and compare ourselves specifically to other school districts that are in our size across the nation. And one of the factors that superintendents and all of us have been looking at is the ratio between starting superintendents and starting teacher salaries. And we wanted to stay at that median or around that number too, to make sure that that's not disproportionate as well. Over the last couple of years, the couple of things that I have advocated for in my contract in terms of making sure that the governance and evaluation models doesn't change, and looking at that ratio and some other pieces, even looking at the long-term liability on the district or trying to reduce the compounding impact. Those are all things that I would also advocate and support for all of our teachers as it relates to their contracts and what's feasible or what's not, based on their roles as well. So I always want to make sure that whatever we're doing, it is fair based on who's doing what function of the organization. But I don't ever want uh, my compensation to come at the expense of our staff. And I know things can be positioned that way, but I will always kind of want to advocate to stay in that ratio based on what the research shows or what the comparable districts is as well.
Ms. Day, you had another question?
Yes, I do. I just wanted to, I know that the FEA from Grant earlier mentioned some stuff, some data, and I know that Jim echoed that too as well. I just want to know what kind of data that are available to, so we can compare this, so this way it can be easier for majority of us to see, hey, where is it that what are we missing out of this data? You know, and I know that there is a lot of amazing data that we might have in our districts, and with including the teachers' salary and so forth. I'm just wondering, where is that brackets, you know, because I can see it, but at the same time, just want to understand, because I don't want to hear FEA to, you know, to say 1.9 or 1.93 something or 1 point certain thing. I'm just going by what I'm trying to understand here. So at least, you know, we are in the same boat as everybody's, you know, and as teachers, just looking at this teacher salary and increase, you know, each and every year. I know that they go by their education levels and so forth, because not a lot of us in the district probably may understand that piece or. So my question is,
there we go.
so my question is, out of this, are there any data that are available that can enter counter what Mr. Grant said and what we have already on the table?
I guess I would just direct you to look at our negotiated agreement and then look at those numbers and compare with what's in front of us right now. I guess that's the best comparative data that we can come up with, I guess, is looking at the two contracts both.
So I guess for me is, I'm just trying to understand exactly what's going on, and so that way we want to have discrepancy on data that are being presented to us at the board, and then also to at the FEA. I just want to understand why, what is the differences in between of those? What is the problems, you know? If there's, I know that we all are working together, you know, to solve the issues and to solve the problems, so that way we can all work together, you know. But I just want to understand what are we missing? So really is, what is it missing out there that we can fix, you know, to make sure that the teacher get what they want, at the same time the administration get what they want to as well.
Melissa?
Yes, Mr. Johnson?
Um, Namal, I don't quite know how to give you a clear answer to your question on data, but I do want to stress to you that Mr. Kraft was speaking as a union representative, and he was posturing from the perspective of representing a slice of our employees. He didn't disagree with the numbers in the contract that's before us to approve. He just cast them with a multiplier effect that, quite frankly, was his own mathematic formula. It had really no bearing whatsoever on what we're doing with Dr. Gandhi's contract. And as Seth pointed out, really wasn't even totally transparent for what occurs for each person that's on the teacher's contract. So while it's a good question about the data, and I would love to be like at the next negotiation committee meeting so we can really discuss what misinformation you heard tonight, I don't really think this is the time to do it at this meeting. but a good question for sure.
Thank you. Other questions or comments, Mr. Clark?
Yeah, I'm still on the I guess it was a how much $2,500 increase to reimbursement. Is that it? We'll just call it a sizable bump to reimbursement. What was there like a identified like need or like or something the committee or Dr. Gandhi said, hey, like I'm spending $40,000 a year on travel and meals, or like I guess I'm just wondering why like that particular thing got an increase. Was it just kind of for fun, or was there like what was the need identified there?
I mean, for starters, I guess inflation, it hasn't been increased in a while, and I can't speak to tracking. I think that's the reason why we just set a specific number so that we're not wasting a lot of time counting every single mile that's driven and things like that. But that was some of the things that were discussed. So
We have a weird governance structure where our board negotiates with our certified staff, and then it's an administration's purview with different other employee groups as well. So almost to the same level of this conversation that's happening at the board dias, we have to have those conversations in our district too. I think you know more than anyone else that sometimes a percentage across the board could mean different things to different numbers as well. So there is another employee group as well that for more than my entire tenure has had that same expense reimbursement. And I did use that as an avenue too, because I too look at like the ratio, like places, what the impact is going to be on the district with a compounding salary. So I'll be transparent and say that when the board said, like, the ad hoc committee said, this is what the numbers are, I said, this could be one avenue to not just add it to a base salary that's going to keep compounding at that higher level too. So that, I don't want to shy away from the fact that that was one of the pieces, but also the expense reimbursement over time has gone, it hasn't increased, so I thought it was appropriate. This is going to sound silly, but like even a lot of culture stuff over the last couple of years, things have gotten really tight in terms of what we can use district expenses on and not, based on gift of public fund clause that's been executed. So that was one of the reasons why I did that for a group of employees in our district. But then I asked for the same avenue if that's what the board wanted to do without just putting it on the salary.
Try and say this with probably less levity than it will sound like, but $1,200 a year for phone expenses, you should change your carrier. My wife and I pay less than that with payments on phones that are not totally paid off. So that number seems high to me. Personally, Verizon's cheaper than whatever you're doing. But 1,200 does seem high for one phone line.
I don't know what I'm doing wrong, but I'd be, if I got a $1,200 a month phone allowance, I'd still be paying out of pocket. So.
Yeah, there actually are a cheaper version out there too, so.
All right, other questions or comments?
Go ahead.
Yes, Ms. Christensen.
I'm feeling obligated to maybe state a few things after, it just feels like there was a lot that was going on here in this conversation. I do want to state that I don't necessarily think that a superintendent is worth 5 starting teachers. I don't like that comparison by any means. I think unfortunately, when we look at all of our salaries throughout the district, you do have to be competitive. And so I want our salary for our superintendent to stay competitive with others in the state and in the region. But I don't ever want us to think of a superintendent as being worth 5 other people within our district. And I also I just disagree very much with the comment earlier comparing custodians and superintendents, because I just think that everybody is really valuable, and I think that starts to put people maybe on these different spectrums or lanes, and I don't like that. I personally have never been a huge fan of maybe like an even 5% across the board, because if you think about somebody who makes 40K getting a 5% raise, that's $2,000, whereas somebody who's making 200,000, that's $10,000. And that to me just doesn't seem fair. So I just want to add that to the conversation, that I hope that some of the comments that were made tonight are not reflective necessarily of my values about some of our employees.
Thank you very much.
I'll say too, that I've always had an issue with one percentage for somebody is a different, and we've had conversations at the level between the board and the FEA on those things too, and so I think that's a thing that's always on the radar when it doesn't. I don't think it really matters on what group of employees we're talking about. That's always still a point of contention or discussion or whichever word you'd like to use.
Yeah, Mr. Clark?
I guess in light of both comments from Katie and Seth about, a percentage for one person is not the same as a percentage for another person. You guys were both on the committee, and, Seth, when you introduced this, you kind of at the outset were like, hey, 4% was kind of where we were aiming for, because that's what we did with our other contract that we negotiated. I get those, what you just said versus what you said at the start kind of don't jive 100%.
No. I mean, I think I was saying I want our salary for a superintendent to be competitive, and so that does keep it competitive with similar districts in the state and in the region.
What was the this ad hoc committee unanimous with their recommendations?
Nikki is not here, but in the committee, yes, we were.
Other questions or comments? All right, seeing none, Ms. Campbell, could you please call the roll for us?
Christensen,
Yes.
Clark,
Yes.
Day,
Yes.
Holden,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Berkland.
Yes. Motion carries. We will move on to our final item of business, which comes to us through memo number 122, our Bennett Elementary School sign. Dr. Gandhi, would you like to introduce this?
Sure. Prior to COVID, the Bennett PTO had began raising some funds for the electronic sign at Bennett Elementary School. That effort was a little bit stalled during COVID because the pandemic happened. During that time as well, the obviously, I think most of you know, prices escalated significantly for cost of materials and everything else. So the Bennett PTO kind of approached us after kind of the pandemic and saying, this is where we are. Can we kind of finish this project? And then would the district be able to support this project as well? Now, there's two other layers to this conversation. One is that there has been an equity conversation around PTOs, school signs, or even just PTO things that can impact schools directly. What if some PTOs are able to do something and other schools aren't? So that was something that we've been, school signs even predates me in a conversation that what I've been told historically from the district, that's been addressed. And that's also one of the reasons why in the last couple of years we had put in an EL that would require board approval for certain donations and certain projects above a certain threshold. The other reason we put in that EL is just because someone might be able to raise funds for a very specific need, but then that could divert our time, energy, and effort away from what our maintenance and facilities plan had already identified for the work that we had to do, what was on the list, right? It would essentially jump something in queue. So the EL was put in place to go through planning and then get board approval so we can hash some of those things out. As it relates to the school signed and what James, our facilities director, shared with the planning committee, is that he is already working on a plan with the long-range plan to update all of our school signs that would be consistent. So being able to finish whatever the gap is between what the Bennett PTO is donating and doing this now won't necessarily divert away or create equity concerns, because part of our long-range plan is to update the signs for the buildings that aren't already an electronic sign or meeting kind of some of these standards. So he would be supportive of and not look at it as a major diversion of his team's work or efforts for next year, because he can already fit it into a plan. We can take it, the district can benefit from the great work that the Bennett PTO has already done, and then still move forward with trying to execute the consistency of the plans. And therefore, that memo is being brought to you to approve that project as we move forward.
Melissa?
Yes.
As chair of planning committee, because this came before us, I want to start by making a motion that the Fargo Board of Education authorize the acceptance of funds or money raised for the electronic sign at Bennett Elementary and commit to using the donated funds for that purpose, so long as the fundraising group meets all of the criteria and follows the processes identified by administration.
Second.
And should it be seconded, I have something to share.
Second, yeah.
Yes, you have a second.
I think it's important to know, first of all, we've got a lot of community support, parent support for education in Fargo. And obviously the parents of the Bennett community are committed to helping do whatever they can for the school. One of the things we talked about at planning, and it didn't come up just because of this, but it's really an equity issue that I think Dr. Gandhi briefly touched on, that we shouldn't be relying on PTAs or PTOs, whatever their structure might be, to fund critical infrastructure parts of our delivery model. Years ago, early in my board career, playground equipment used to be funded by a trilateral approach. 1/3 from the district, 1/3 from the park district, 1/3 from the school's PTA. So that's how every playground circa 2000 had been built. And based upon the wealth of your local neighborhood, you might have had a little better playground. I'm happy to say in my tenure, we've come to where I've understood that that playground is integral to the delivery of education. These signs are integral to the communication and transparency to our community. So while I am going to vote to support this, I want to encourage future PTAs and PTOs to find other ways to use their resource capabilities to support the classroom teachers as opposed to brick and mortar solutions.
Thank you very much. Other comments or questions? All right, seeing none, Ms. Campbell, could you please call the roll?
Clark,
Yes.
Day,
Yes.
Holden,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Berkland.
Yes, motion carries, and we will move on to our board reports. Mr. Johnson, let's start with you since you're online.
Well, thank you. Planning met earlier this morning as we discussed some insurance options and some other issues going on in terms of district overall in terms of free and reduced lunches. Our next planning meeting is May 21st. And as you may all recall, one of the things we'd like to look at is the standard of effort report. I've gotten a little feedback, I believe from Robin, who's not with us tonight, but if you have any parts of that report that you think shouldn't be included or things that should be included, please get them over to myself or anybody else on the planning committee, because that's one of the topics we're going to be looking at next week. With that, I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Christensen, can we move on to you?
Sure. On April 25th, I attended a negotiations committee meeting. On April 30th, I attended the Youth Leadership Awards. It was hosted by YouthWorks, where our superintendent received an award, and also I know at least one student from our district received an award. Then I spent a lot of time at Discovery. On May 3rd, I was there for a Cinco de Mayo celebration in Mr. Erlacher's class. On May 6th, I was there for Culture Night hosted by the PTA. And on May 9th, Dr. Gross and I performed a duet during a band concert with Dr. Gross on tuba and me on flute, and I do not play the flute. So it was a rather interesting, you made noise. Yeah, it was a rather interesting event. It was also Mr. Luck's last concert as he is retiring, and he was fabulous. So much energy and excitement in the room. May 13th, I was at a band concert at North High, which was also fabulous, which also featured their administrators. So that was good time. And then this morning, I was able to have one-on-ones with Dr. Gandhi and Anne Marie.
Thank you very much. Mr. Clark.
I attended negotiations committee on the 25th of April. On the 30th, I had a conversation with Dr. Gross about summer curriculum stuff. I think we might have spoken another time the next day or two or something. Had a couple conversations about that. On the 6th of May, I attended the League of Women Voters forum to scope out future board members. There's a recording of that in case anyone's interested. And then, yeah, this morning we had planning.
Thank you. Mr. Holden.
On the 25th of April, we had a negotiations committee meeting. On the 2nd of May, had a Native American Commission meeting. And on the 3rd, the next day, I attended a diversity and education event that was hosted by the League of Women Voters, which was very informative. And then this morning planning met, and that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Tate?
Thank you. I was invited to EL Family by Tamara. I just want to say thank you for inviting me for that. It was at the Fargo Library off on 32nd. It was really fun. There was a lot of family that show up on that day, including one of the DEI from the city, Terry, Dr. Terry. He was there. It was really fun. I really enjoyed meeting each and every one of the family members that were there. They were so friendly. It was really packed. They ate food. It was really, and then the kids end up with pad, like computer pad. It was fun to, get to see them like just draw someone pink, someone blue. So that was interesting. And then after that, and then I decided, I want to step away from there. And then I went to Ed Clap to see the students with the talent show. It was fun. Don't get me wrong. They were singing, they were dancing. I don't even know. There was just a lot of things that were going on, but I love it, every one of them. And then I had the student lunch too as well that I normally do. Today I didn't go because I wasn't feeling well, but I bet I'll get an email because, once I didn't show up, the student will like, where's Miss Day? Some will just literally like will tell me on my face like, I missed you. Why didn't you why didn't you come on that day? I have a lot to talk to you about. So that was a good thing. Then just like Miss Christensen said, I attended a cultural night at Discovery Middle School. It was so interesting that after my daughter left 4 years ago, for me to come back, it was very interesting for me to open that door and get to see I believe one of the principal was there, but I wasn't sure. But like I said, I really enjoyed the dancings and the singing and the food that they have. But I just want to say thank you for really is for inviting me there. I really get to see what our student are capable of. Thank you.
Thank you. So a few folks have mentioned negotiations committee meeting on April 25th. Also on April 25th, I went to Ben Franklin Middle School and was a guest judge for the band solos, which is a really neat experience. And Ms. Christensen was also at that too. And then on April 30th, I also attended the Youth Leadership Awards, which was the inaugural YouthWorks evening. Which I thought they did a fantastic job, and it was really neat to see Dr. Gandhi and then some of our students being honored. And that was very fun. We had planning this morning, and I believe that was about it. Our next regular board meeting is on May 28th. It is 7:21 p.m., and we are adjourned.